And next, we will have an opening speech by the head of Bachelor of Applied English Study Program, Vocational College of Universitas Gadjah Mada, Mr. Ahmad Muam, SSMSC. Or Mr. Muam, the screen is yours.
Okay, Jack. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ichan. Very good afternoons to all of you, to all of the participants. This afternoon's, I'm more than happy and grateful to be here, to be invited for the webinar. We have a lot of this kind of activity, and we always have a new topic to discuss. So I'm so proud to be here for all of you, the students who have prepared this kind of activity. Then on behalf of the organizations, I would like to say thanks to, especially to Miss Devi, who have been the main supporters to support all of the students to conduct the project-based learnings that you are able to learn by doing some things, and also not only to discuss on specific topics, but you also learning how to manage this kind of an events. Then this afternoons, we are going to learn and also get a lot of knowledge from three great speakers. Great speakers. The first one, we have Pak Edi Superianto. Personally, I say thank you, Pak Edi, for your time. You have allocated your times to be here to share your knowledge and also to talk about your new books. Pak Edi was my lectures and still my lecturer, always my lectures. I learned a lot from Pak Edi. When we talk about wayangs, when I remember about wayang, then I always remember Pak Edi Superianto. And the second ones, we are going to learn from another perspective in relations to wayang from Bu Jiba, right? From Bumo, then from the UNESCO, we are going to learn as well in the relation to wayang from the world perspective, from UNESCO perspective, in what way truly wayang play important roles as a part of our cultures in international community. And the last, we also have the great speakers this afternoon, Bu Debbie. Nice to see you again, Bu Debbie. The last times we talked about BBL, right? I mean, we learned a lot about the master degree, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of months ago. So thank you. So this morning we are going to learn as well from Bu Debbie. Then after all, on behalf of the study programs, we are once again, we are so happy to have this kind of activity for all of you, particularly for the students. And this is probably the ideal learnings that we are going to have, and we're going to make it more in the futures, that you do not only learn in the classes, but also learning a lot from the industry, from the other environments. You absorb a lot of issues, then you bring them into the classes, then you talk about it, then you practice the skills that you have learned in the class for kind of this afternoon. So without further ado, I believe that we're waiting for a lot of importance and new knowledge. So let us begin. Let us begin the events this afternoons. Then once again for Ms. Dewi, I say thank you for helping the study programs and helping the students to have this kind of wonderful events. So thank you and good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Mr. Muam.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the opening remarks.
Yeah.
And without further ado, I would like to introduce my also fellow from Bachelor of Applied English Study Program 2020, Vocational College of Universitas Gadjah Mada, Sonia Valda Hersalinka. Sonia will be the moderator of today's sessions and discussion. Sonia, the screen is yours.
All right, thank you, Guzian. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 39 webinar event talk with the theme Wayang Across Cultures, Storytelling, and Interquality. First of all, let me introduce myself once again. I'm Sonia Valder Salenka from the Bachelor of Applied English Study Program, Batch 2020. It is my pleasure to be here as the moderator for this webinar. Before we get started, I would like to explain the agenda of our discussion in today's webinar. We will have three sessions of presentation and Q&A. For the first session, we will have Mujiba as Chief Culture Unit UNESCO, Jakarta. The second session, we will have Dr. Debbie Cole as Associate Professor, Faculty of Humanity, Utrecht University, Netherlands. Last but not least, we will have Dr. Edi Supriyanto as book author and then Langkan Chil. Once again, I would like to remind you that participants are allowed to deliver or type their question only in the Q&A session because the chat box will be used by the committee to do spontaneous translation. All right, without further ado, let's start with the first speaker, Mujiba. And I would like to remind you once again that participants are allowed to deliver or type their question only in the Q&A session because the chat box will be used by committee to do a spontaneous translation. All right, Mr. Mujiba, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you hear my voice. Great. S- So, good afternoon, dear friends from the UGM and Dr. Edvi Pursa Pianto. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Hello, Dr. Devi from the Netherlands. And of course, hello, Pa Ahmed Maun, and also my friend Ba Devi, who is not on the screen. Once again, good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to this talk session on the occasion of the book launch. Um well, unfortunately, I'm not the expert of Wayang, so I won't add any insight about this part. I'll leave it to Dr. Edi and Bu and the Dr. Debbie. And however, as you know, UNESCO is a cultural wing of the United Nations. C of UNESCO stands for culture. And one of the important mandate of the organization is to safeguard traditional knowledge and skills of the communities that we call intangible cultural heritage, as opposed to artworks or heritage sites that we call tangible heritage. Actually, I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation, and I wonder if this is being shown on the screen. Great, thank you very much. Yes. So, as I was saying, so I'm not expert on Wayang, but what I'd like to talk about is how UNESCO is dealing with this intangible cultural heritage, which is a traditional knowledge and skills of the communities. We call it intangible cultural heritage, ICH, as opposed to artworks or heritage sites that we call tangible heritage. And of course, Wayang is definitely one of the intangible cultural heritage. In UNESCO, we support intangible cultural heritage, ICH, by adopting an international agreement called Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage, was adopted in 2003. And this convention, what it does is to provide a guideline and a platform for exchange for the government across the world for the safeguarding of ICH in their respective territories. Because maintaining an old practice has many challenges that require a bit of strategic planning. So there has been many discussion by the governments, experts, and NGOs on good actions to safeguarding ICH. And this is what I wish to share with you today, because as you, as a student of humanities studies, might one day be engaged in the actions for the protection of the traditional arts and culture, whether it's Wayang or something else. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. We think that safeguarding intangible cultural heritage often requires more complicated works than protecting a heritage site or an art object. Because ICH is about knowledge and practice, so its survival depends solely on the community and their wills to continue the practice. For an art object or a heritage site, often the government or experts can exercise top-down decision to protect those items by declaring them as a heritage of national importance and by putting them into a museum or in an archaeological park, as you do for Borobudur. But as you can imagine, you cannot do the same thing with intangible cultural heritage. You cannot force people to continue ICH if they don't want. So if we want an intangible cultural heritage to continue, we have to create what we call an enabling environment for people to feel happy to continue their practice. So what does it mean? This means that the guru or the main knowledge holders are happy and proud to continue their practice. But then there's also a young generation who are eager to learn the new techniques, to inherit the tradition from the older generations. And it is also important this whole process of knowledge transmission is encouraged and supported by the public. The public is eager that this knowledge transmission happens. So you have to actually work with the people at three different levels: the guru, the young generations, and the public. Now, next slide, please. But this is often a very complicated task because in many parts of the world, the ICH practitioners often live in poverty. Well, before coming to Indonesia, I spent a lot of time in India, so I have a lot of examples from that country. What you see on the screen is the what we call the Natua dancers from the northern part of India. They were traditional community. I mean, the traditional community of dancers who used to and acrobatics who used to perform in the court of the kings. But as the time passes by and there's no more feudal system, now they have lost the place to perform. They lost their sponsors, and now what they are doing is to perform as a street beggars on the street in the busy, in the urban areas, and often chased away by the police. In, in in India, unfortunately, there are also suicidal cases of traditional artisans because when people, because they could not make their living. So so when people can hardly make their living out of their traditional ICH, we cannot blame them if they want to stop their traditional practice and search for the different jobs, right? Next slide, please. Well, in addition to the issues of the poverty, many of the custodians of the ICH belong to so-called marginalized groups. In case of India, a lot of ICH knowledge holders are in the rural areas. They belong to what we call the lower caste or the tribal groups. So their socioeconomic conditions are very low. Well, in case of Indonesia, once again, maybe situation may not be as bad as India, but we are also aware that the traditional knowledge holders often do not live in the best conditions. Here, I give an example of Gorga carvers from Toba. Many of them actually belong to a minority, have a minority religion, and do not always enjoy the kind of exposures and support. And there's also an example of Nokken from Papua. this is also another element from Indonesia on the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage list. But what is the conditions of the fisherwomen? Well, you know that better than me. And even batik, which is such an important national heritage for Indonesia and also national industry. Well, you know that many of the women in the rural areas who are making it are, are not often in the mainstream of the society. So understanding the socioeconomic conditions of the ICH practitioners is one of the very important planning of the ICH safeguarding action. Unless they're financially and socially viable, there's no reason for people to want to continue an ICH practice. So an entrepreneurship skill development for ICH practitioners is a very important component of our actions. But this is not the only one. Next slide, please. To ensure the continuity of an intangible cultural heritage practices, it is also important to create a mechanism by which the knowledge stays in the community. You may find it a bit strange, but actually it's very common that the community do not always have the good means to keep record of their own tradition. I put the pictures here in the screen. On the left are the musicians from the desert of Rajasthan in India. They are very popular, famous. They're very popular and famous for their tradition of singing. They are naturally born singers. And the scholars across the world came to study, do the recording and documentation of these artisans and their traditions. But these data have not been shared with this musicians group. So there was one entity in India who actually decided to create the community archives, so that the musicians themselves are the ones who keeps the record and hold the data of their own music. On the right side is another example from India by the work of NGO called Kalaraksha, who has done the documentation of the traditional embroidery motif in Gujarat, India. And this area is very known for the very intricate embroideries made by the women. But then this region was hit by the earthquake in 2001. And because the women needed cash to support their families, what happened is that they start selling their very old collections. And actually their work are so good that a lot of international collectors came and bought them. And what happened is that then the women actually start losing the knowledge of the very different embroidery motifs, that has been inherited from their grandmothers. And so this is how the NGO just came up to say that that knowledge of this embroidery motifs have to stay with the community, with the women, and started this documentation. Well, many of you watching this presentation are the students, and I'm sure some of you will be engaged maybe in the documentations or recording the traditional knowledge or traditional arts and culture. So when you do that, please do think about sharing what you have studied with the communities back. Don't just run away with your knowledge to get your PhD, okay? Now, next slide, please. Another important fact is that things we have to think about is that we have to create a system by which the ICH knowledge holders are socially recognized and valued for their practices. Well, fortunately, many countries already have schemes for that in the form of a program or a prize. So here, for instance, in Japan, we have a program called the Living Master program. And it's not very easy to obtain that title. It has to go through a lot of scrutiny and the review by the experts panel to receive this title. But it's a very coveted social recognition. And So everybody will look upon, in Japan, everybody will just respect and look upon this national living master, or we call it the living treasure, uh, as somebody great. This recognition may not necessarily make them rich, but at least it is very effective in sending a positive message that to everybody, to the younger generation, that the pursuing intangible cultural heritage like these masters is something maybe very valuable that deserve social kind of appreciations. Next slide, please. And as I said at the beginning, because intangible cultural heritage needs interest from the public, we also encourage the countries to adopt different means for public education. In Indonesia, for instance, Pekalongan actually has done a very good program involving the schools and the museum to educate young children on how to make batik as part of their curriculum. They have done a very comprehensive citywide training wherein the school children will learn how to draw, how to make the dye, etc. from in collaboration with the masters and the museums. Another example is again from India on the right side. Well, India has a lot of community radios, and these radios often, do the interview, the documentation, recording of the traditional singers, folk singers from the villages, and help them a lot to disseminate knowledge. So it is very important that there is. Okay, I have 5 minutes more. Thank you very much. So it's very important that so these are some of the effective methods to try educate in public that something called intangible cultural heritage exists and get their interest. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So of course, although intangible heritage is about traditional knowledge, use of information and communication technologies, ICTs, is also being promoted for different reasons. Here, again, example from India, we did a training of the young weavers community in using internet. And so we established the internet center. And what happened afterwards is that young people who lost interest in weaving actually decided to stay back and start to support their parents by doing the online marketing and also doing the digital designing of the weaving motifs. Yeah, so this is how the ICT and safeguarding of ICH can go hands in hands. Next slide, please. And oops, what is the next slide? Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, there's one. And also the government regulations can help a lot to increase the demand for the intangible cultural heritage products. Like in Bhutan, I don't know if you know, but Foreskin made it mandatory for people to wear traditional costumes at work and schools. So this obviously has increased the demand for the traditional weaving. And Indonesia, I'm aware the on Batik Day or every Friday, the government have to wear the batik shirts. And that once again is a very simple but effective way to increase the purchase of the products that supports the weaver's livelihood. Okay, next slide, please. And then, of course, finally, to safeguard ICH, it is very important to ensure that the materials, tools, and the space for practices are available. For instance, I give an example from Japan. I'm Japanese. This is a bunlak puppetry. The main figures, of course, is a puppeteers, but he has to be supported by those who make the instruments, the puppets, and also the group of singers who narrate the stories. And these are totally different groups and with different trainings. So you have to make sure that, and so unless one piece is missing, obviously the whole bunlak puppetry would not exist. And I'm sure they would go same with Wayang. I am not sure if the one who is performing the Wayang is also the same as the one making the puppetry. If it's not the same, then you have to work on both levels. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm finishing my presentation now. So I just wanted to give here some issues that basically we have to consider when one tries to safeguard intangible cultural heritage. There are many other issues like climate change, migration, conflict, natural disaster that all affect intangible cultural heritage. But today, I hope you got an idea that safeguarding ICH is a very comprehensive exercise that need to be worked out at every level. It's almost like addressing all the SDGs. As university students, I suppose your work often focuses on research and documentation of intangible cultural heritage. They're indeed very important, but they are just perhaps one aspect of ICH safeguarding. So I wish to invite you to think how your work can eventually contribute to other aspects of intangible cultural heritage safeguarding actions. So with this, I wish to end my presentations and thank you very much for listening.
All right. Thank you, Mujiba, for the great presentation. Everyone, let's give applause for the very great book launch. Please give emoji to the Zoom. All right, thank you. So, uh, uh, before we go to the next session, let's turn on our camera for the documentation. Everyone, please turn on your camera. All right, 1, 2, 3. Once again, 1, 2, 3. Okay, for the book launch, Miss Mujiba, the screen is yours.
Okay.
I would like to invite you to launch the book officially, Miss Mujiba.
Okay, how should I do to launch it? Shall I open this?
Yes, yes.
So obviously, I'm not the Wayang expert, but I'm glad to be part of this launching ceremony to celebrate the launch of this Canciliana, and I'm very much eager to hear what the content is all about. So with this, may I declare that the book is launched?
Yes. Please give applause, everyone. Thank you for your very great book launch. Thank you, everyone. Please give it applause by the emoji on the Zoom. For today is the World Wayang Day, but that's very great because we have a book launch that um, with Wayang Day. So, okay, thank you, Mujiba, for the great presentation. For the second session, will be presentation from Dr. Debbie Cole. once again, I would like to remind you that participants are allowed to deliver or type their question only in the Q&A session because the chat box will be used by the committee to do a spontaneous translation. Okay, Dr. Debbie, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by saying thank you to the organizers and moderators of this event, and especially to Mbak Nofi, who has been in touch with me to get me prepared for this event. I'd also like to send a special thank you to Dr. Dewi from the Department of Foreign Languages, Arts and Culture and Management at UGM for the invitation to be here today, and to Pak Ahmed Muammar for supporting this event. This is impressive work, all of you students, for putting this together. It's so professional. And congratulations to the teachers of this program for giving the students the chance to do this kind of practical learning so they can put the things they're learning in your courses immediately into practice. It's an honor to be here today and to also share this podium with Bumoy Chiba. Utrecht is a UNESCO City of Literature, so I learned a lot listening to your talk, and I'm impressed especially with the project in Pekalongan where the children are learning to make batik in schools. And then I would like to say a special thank you to Pak Eddie for adopting me and my whole family when we came to Jogja many years ago, for introducing us to Wayang and to Javanese culture. And without you, I wouldn't be talking at all about this at all today. Pak Eddie guided me through the process of doing research and my dissertation and modeled for me what it meant to be an intercultural storyteller, both in everyday life and at the many storytelling events he took me to, where he acted as a translator and cultural explainer. This picture that you see on the screen is one of my most treasured photographs. It is of Pak Eddie doing a Wayang Kancil performance in English at UGM in 2008, kalau tidak salah. And the little boy there is my son, Francis, who fell in love with Wayang and the characters in the stories, and Pak Eddie encouraged this love. And here he's invited him to come sit up front with him while he's telling the story. So I will frame this short talk today around some very basic concepts related to making texts of any kind, and the concepts are on the screen as well: audience and purpose and form. I use these concepts in almost all of my courses when I ask students to analyze texts, but also especially when I ask students to produce their own texts. And you are all probably already very familiar with this concept, so I hope that reviewing them will help to sharpen your text-making skills, and that maybe by applying them to Pak Eddie's book, Kancilayana, you may take a look at how Kancil stories may function interculturally. So for every text we create, from writing an SMS to an email to writing a research paper or an essay, we make decisions about our audience and the purposes and forms of our texts. And sometimes we make these decisions unconsciously because we're so familiar with how to make them. But other times we need to make them very consciously, and storytelling is a form of text production where we tend to make these decisions quite consciously. So when we decide about our audience and our purpose and our form, we need to ask ourselves some questions. And so with audience, we ask, who is my audience? What common vocabulary do we have? What common expectations do we have about genre and style or language use? And interculturally, where might our expectations differ? And these questions necessarily lead us to the questions of form. In which form shall I deliver my message? What should my text look like? What should it sound like? And speaking of forms, I wanted to compliment the students on the beautiful poster and background that you made. I was struck by the color choices that you had for the background, and I'm sorry that I can't place it behind me. My computer won't let me do this at the moment. When our texts are constructed for audiences whose cultural practices differ from our own, we have to think especially carefully about our assumptions about their expectations about appropriate form, and how we can nonetheless convey our messages when the forms we are used to making might not be familiar to our audience. And there's always the question of purpose. And sometimes this is the hardest question to answer. What is my purpose? What do I want my text to do? How will it function in its cultural context or in its intercultural context? What effect do I want it to have on my audience? So let's start by applying these concepts to my talk here, and then we'll move on to applying them to Pak Edi's book. So the form, I'm obviously presenting a talk, I'm speaking orally, and I've organized it around the concepts of audience, purpose, and form, and this sort of creates an outline for my presentation. And my audience is mostly, although there's lots of people in the audience, mostly students of English who are interested in, among other things, intercultural communication and storytelling. And my purpose is to say some things that I find interesting about Pak Edi's book, things that I hope you will also find interesting and maybe even useful. Pak Edi's Kanchilayana is, I believe, a particularly instructive text for illustrating and thinking about these concepts, especially in the context of intercultural communication. So here, let's start again with form. One of the important elements of form is the medium, by which I mean the physical stuff in which we put the message. When I'm talking to my students, I defined medium as the physical constraints on the form of a message. So its form is constrained by the physical properties of whatever medium you're choosing. We just saw in the presentation by Bu Moi that we had forms of dance, we had forms of puppetry, we had forms of batik, and all of those art forms, you can do particular things in them, and that's what makes them beautiful, but there are things you can't do in some of them, right? You can't do the same things you can do in dance that you can do in batik. So there are different constraints on form depending on whether we choose our voices to communicate, for example, or the written word. And humans can use a very wide range of physical substances to tell each other stories. We can use sound waves, we use light waves, we use electricity, we use paper, we use ink, we use film, we use stone, we use leather puppets. In the introduction to his book, Pak Edi documents some of the many ways the stories of Kanchil have been translated and performed in different mediums. Some version of the stories, he writes, have survived for nearly 2,000 years, traveled to many places. And as he writes, quote, the Panchatantra stories that exist in contemporary Indonesia have appeared in various forms. Some of the stories that were passed on orally have been used in the reliefs of Mendut and Sojiwan temples. And in his book, he provides some examples only from 3 forms, he says, that is literary works, shadow puppet shows, Wayang Kanchil, and other audiovisual media. Humans are very creative in finding new media in which to tell their stories. The use of leather puppets and light shining through them to create a shadow on the screen is a particularly intricate and beautiful medium for the telling and retelling of Kanchil stories. So Pak Edi's book is remarkable, I think, in that it enables readers of Bahasa Indonesia and English to retell these stories in the medium of Wayang itself, assuming that they have access to the puppets, an important point that was made in the last talk, and that they could also reproduce these stories in a culturally appropriate way. He provides us with instructions for puppet movement and placement, as well as musical notation for the accompanying gamelan orchestra, for example. So if you also have an orchestra, you can also play the appropriate songs. And as a script of the stories, the books also makes possible future tellings of the Kanchil story in whatever mediums future readers think will be appropriate for their audiences, which leads us to consider the audiences of Kanchilayana, the book itself. But first, let's start with the stories. Who are the audience of the Kanchil stories? Something that is very interesting about the Kanchil stories Pak Edi presents in his book is that they seem to be written for multiple audiences at once. This is a very tricky skill. If you can manage to write something that appeals to a wide range of audiences, then you're doing a very good job. One of the ways we can see this is by looking at language use. There are many places where we can see in the language of the stories that these stories are meant for children. For example, we see this in the name of one of the characters, Scooby Dog, in the play Water War. By using the name Scooby, Pak Edi addresses a contemporary audience, one that might be familiar with the popular cartoon Scooby-Doo, in which Scooby is the name of the main character, who is also, in fact, a dog. My favorite passage that is written with an ear to the kind of language that children might find appealing is in the description of where all the different animals come from in the story, the tiger and the bull. Here's the quote I love from this passage. So the story goes, The big family cats live in Tigress Village. Lions live in the grassland. Crocodiles live in a large lake called Croco Lake. Goats and sheep live in Goaty Meadow. Deer inhabit a place called Deer Field. The dog families live in Canine Highland. Boars live in Bordy Cave. Rhinoceros lives in Rhino Park. The bird families live in Birdie Park. So you might imagine a child playing with toy animals and telling such a story to themselves. An adult might ask, where do the goats live? And the child might say, in Goaty Meadow. And where do the deers live? Oh, they live in Deer Field. This is an obvious kind of logic to children of a certain age, and using this kind of language here shows that the author is thinking about what his audience will find appealing. But the stories are also written for adults, not only adults who may be in the audience when the plays are performed, but also for adults, like I said earlier, who may want to tell these stories themselves. Again, we also get the instructions for how to move the puppets, how to place the puppets, how to bring the music in at appropriate times. Something that struck me as I was preparing for this talk is I was inspired to imagine the people who carved these stories into the stones of the temples that still survive today in Java. Could they have imagined us, an audience so many years into the future, would be reading their stories off the stone walls today? And what an excellent choice of media. They chose a form that would last for a very long time. And finally, we return to purpose. I've already said some things about the purpose of the book as a whole, but one thing I didn't mention is that the book serves as a documentation of the history of Wayang Kancho. We see this especially in the introduction, but we see it also in the fact that there's a wide range of multiple stories that are there. And this contributes to the continual retelling of these stories that has been going on for centuries. So let's briefly here consider the purposes of the Kancho stories themselves. And the nice thing about the Kancho stories is they also tell us what their purpose is. The stories Pakeri has included in his book consider such important issues as water scarcity, maintaining a balanced ecosystem, engaging in balanced behavior, as in being able to choose when to stop doing something when it becomes harmful for you and to others. These are important and timely issues, and in some senses, they are perhaps quite heavy topics for children. But presented as they are in the stories, children can begin to see the importance of caring about these things. And the plays can serve as a narrative that parents can share with their children or teachers can share with students to begin to talk about these things together. So one purpose of the Kancho stories is to guide our attention to the important issues that we're all facing together as humans on this planet. Another important purpose is to share intercultural values. As these stories are translated into English, Pakeri can share values that are important to many people in Java with people who may never have a chance to visit Java. One example of this is the value of tape grame, which Mr. Keong Snail explains to Kancho like this. Tape grame is Javanese, meaning any activity or work to help any creature in this world. You, and he's speaking now to Kancho, you have to support whoever needs help. When you meet any plants needing help, you have to come to their aid. Even you have to help human beings if needed. Elsewhere, Mr. Keong Snail teaches Kancho other important lessons. He says, if you are speedy, do not overtake. If you think you are smart, do not be so cheeky. If you are powerful, be merciful. Here too, we see that the author has chosen language forms that can be understandable to children and to adults. And thus, the lessons that Kancho is learning are directed at all of us. Thank you, Pakeri, for this beautiful book and for your dedication to translating the Kancho stories for so many people around the world. I will end with a refrain that is included in all of the Kancho stories in Kanchilayana. Hopefully the message of the Wayang Kancho stories may become a mirror in this life so that they may become a life guide. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Ms. Debbie Barako, for the great presentation. Thank you once again from Dr. Debbie Cole, and for the Q&A session will be held on the last session. Thank you, Ms. Devi. For the next session, we will have the last session, last but not least, that is, we will have Dr. Edi Pursubaryanto. Once again, I would like to remind you that participants are allowed to deliver or type their question only in the Q&A session because the chat box will be used by the committee to do a spontaneous translation. Please, Dr. Edi, I'm curious for what makes you motivate to make this very great book. Mr. Edi, the screen is yours.
Okay. Can you hear my Sonia?
Yes.
Okay. So I should share a screen. So could you please wait for a moment, okay? Can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Okay, so you can hear my PowerPoint. Right, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to greet my friend, Ibu Devi from Utrecht. Thank you very much for coming and giving analysis to my book. And Ibu Mai Chiba, who has launched my book. And also, if I talk about Wayang Kancil, I should mention friends from abroad, like Ibu Irene Ricci from Melbourne, who has collaborated with me writing some Kancil stories, and then to Mbak Sarah Bilby from England, Sussex, who has also supported the Wayang Kancil since 1990s. Okay, my friend from Japan, Nanang Lejar Subroto, and all his friends in his Wayang Kancil community in Japan. Terima kasih, arigatou gozaimasu. And then to my friends at Balai Budaya Minomartani, who also have supported Wayang Kancil and who have also accompanied me in doing the Wayang Kancil. And then I would like also to thank the students organizer who have organized this seminar or this talk this afternoon. Thank you very much. Okay, and if we talk about the Wayang Kancil, then we have to remember this person, this very important person. So this is the photo of Ki Lejar Subroto, the reviver of Wayang Kancil in Yogyakarta. He's when he's still young. Now he's like this. I think no, not like this. He has passed away in 1917. Okay, so these are the photos of Ki Lejar Subroto, and I think all the Wayang Kancil advocates have to remember who he is. Okay, and this book has been dedicated to Ki Lejar Subroto and also all the supporters of Wayang Kancil in Balai Budaya Minomartani and also abroad, as I have mentioned some names before that. Okay, so that's the first thing that I would like to say. And now the MC has mentioned that this afternoon I will give a lecture, Actually, it's not a lecture. It's my experience with the Kancil and also my adventure with the Kancil. So, however, I will give the title of this talk, Fables Across Culture, the story of races in a different version. Okay, here I have a picture, a tortoise, a rabbit, and this is a siput, snail, and also a kancil. Okay. Now, wayang kancil in Indonesia, okay, is called, or is a shadow puppet. Kancil is a mouse deer, okay, a mouse deer. That's what I found, at least in the dictionary. So, why it's called Wayang Kancil? The stories of Wayang Kancil are mostly taken from Dongeng Kancil, or the stories of Kancil. And the stories of Kancil have been transmitted by oral tradition from generation to generation. I remember when I was a child, my grandma, my mother, almost every night gave me a story about Kancil. Some episodes of Kancil stories were found in reading section in several textbooks for school children. At least when I was in the elementary school, the reading section used the Kancil stories. And the Wayang Kancil was revived by Gilejar Subroto in the late 1970s in Yogyakarta. And in early 1980s, I started to perform Wayang Kancil. And now, what is the relation between Wayang Kancil and Indonesian fables? So, students, I think you might have known that fable is a story in which its characters are animals who behave like human beings. Sometimes it contains human beings. And perhaps you may also know that we can find Indonesian fable in the Borobudur Temple. We have the story of Jataka in Mendut Temple, near Borobudur Temple, in Sojiwan Temple. Also in literatures, folk tales, we can find Indonesian fable that is also similar to Dongeng Kancil. In Aceh, we can find Hikayat Pelanduk Jenaka, which is similar to Dongeng Kancil. And in Sunda, West Java, we also find a kind of folk tale called Sakadang Pocang. It's also similar with Cerita Kancil. Of course, nowadays, people can find new books on short fables on internet. So many. Now, one episode which is very popular in the Dongeng Kancil is the Kancil and the Keong. Keong is the snail, and I hope you know this episode, but if not, then I will read some of the episode. Kancil is described as arrogant. When he's taking a walk, he stumbles on a small object, which is in fact Keong, or a snail. Then he is so mad with the little snail, which is crawling so slowly, and he boasts that he's the fastest runner. He even challenges Keong to race. Surprisingly, Keong accepts his challenge if Kancil agrees to do the race on the next day. Keong says that he has not participated in such a race for a long time, so he would need some rest that night. Before the two contestants separate, Keong asked that during the race, Kancil should stop running at particular intervals of distance and call out, "Keong, where are you?" And Keong will respond to his call. Kancil agrees to this request. Before dispersing, they decide that a race will be held the next morning and that they will run along the bank of the river. And that night, Keong orders all his friends to line up along the river bank, but they must hide so that Kancil will not see them. When Kancil calls, "Keong, where are you?" the nearest Keong must give an answer like, "I'm here." When Kancil is nearing the finish and calls again, Keong will be standing on the finish line and will answer. In this clever way, Kancil will be tricked into thinking that he's the loser of the race. Okay, so this is a synopsis. So this is the picture of Wayang Kancil, where we have two characters. The Kancil here and the Keong is here. These two belongs to the collection of Balai Budaya Minomartani. Now, the story about Kancil and the Keong can be found in a book by Ashliman, The Races Between Unequal Contestants. So we know that Kancil is considered as strong and the snail is considered as weak. And we have many races like that in the other stories from other countries. Here we have the book by Ashliman, The Tortoise and the Hare, and other races between unequal contestants. Okay. Of course, I will not read all the book, but I just want to show the title. Look at this. A Hare and a Tortoise by Aesop. Aesop is the father of fables, translated by Sir Roger Lestrange. The Hare and the Tortoise, translated by Samuel Crosall. The Hare and the Tortoise, translated by George Taylor Townsend. And The Hare of the Tortoise, retold by Joseph Jacobs. And look at the number 7, The Hare and Tortoise, by Jean de La Fontaine. I think this also comes from Aesop. And the number 8, The Fox and the Snail, from Switzerland, by Otto Sutermeister. And from Netherlands, The Frog and the Snail, by D.J. Bokennochen. And we have also from Germany with the title The Fox and the Crab, and also The Hare and the Hedgehog. And from Romania, we have Why Does the Buffalo Walk Slowly and Tread Gently? This is about the race of the buffalo and the hare. And also we have from the African American, Mr. Rabbit finds his match at last. And number 17 from American Indian, Too Fast Runner. And here we have others similar stories, okay, like the Kancil and the Keong, or the Kancil and the Snail. Okay. Now, this is also another synopsis of The Hare and the Tortoise by Aesop, which is similar, not really the same. A hare one day ridiculed the short feet and slow pace of the tortoise. The latter, loving, said, "Though you be swift as the wind, I will beat you in a race." The hare, deeming her assertion to be simply impossible, assented to the proposal, and they agreed that the fox should choose the course and fix the goal. On the day appointed for the race, they started together. The tortoise never for a moment stopped, but went on with a slow but steady pace straight to the end of the course. The hare, trusting to his native swiftness, cared little about the race, and lying down by the wayside, and fell fast asleep. At last, waking up and moving as fast as he could, he saw the tortoise had reached the goal and was comfortably dozing after fatigue. Now, this is also another synopsis from Aesop about the hare and the tortoise. Look at the moral. The moral is plodding wins the race. Okay. Also, this is another message from Aesop by Vernon Jones. slow and steady wins the race. Okay, this is a story about the fox and the snail from Switzerland. But I'm not going to read this. Okay, it's all similar. And okay, now this is from African American. Keeping pace, almost the same, similar. Okay, this is from about Brer Rabbit and Old Brer Terrapin, yeah, from the North American. And we can also find the story that is similar with the Kancil and the Keong in Cambodia. Okay, the rabbit is called Sufia rabbit. Sufia rabbit is the counterpart of Kancil of Java, I think. Okay, and also we can find a myth from a temple near Yogyakarta in the Sojiwon Temple, a Hindu temple about 3 kilometers southeast of Prambanan Temple, the Garuda and the turtle. This is from Hindi culture or Indian culture. So the Garuda, a mythical bird who is the vehicle of God Vishnu, has a habit to eat a turtle every day. To end this habit, the turtle leader challenges the Garuda a race to cross the sea by running along a river. They come to an agreement that if the turtle wins, the Garuda has to stop eating turtles. With the turtle's trick, he can defeat the Garuda. So the message of this story is, together we conquer, alone we fail. Cooperation works miracles. So the story about the Garuda and the turtle is similar with or the theme is similar with the Kancil and the snail or the keong. Here's another statue from the Sukoh Temple, which is located in Karanganyar, Surakarta. This is the picture about the Garuda, the elephant, and the turtle. This is part of the story of the Garuda and the turtle. And I think we can also find some remains in the Borobudur or in Mendut, like this. Now, I have a friend from New York, America. Her name is Tamara Fielding. He's a puppeteer of Wayang Kancil from USA. He has learned the Wayang Kancil from Yogyakarta, from Kilajar Subroto, and from me, and from other friends. So he's now, she's now also playing Wayang Kancil, I hope. Now, what is important from Tamara Fielding is her message when she has to retell the story about the Kancil and the snake. So this is Tamara Fielding's message. A little bit, I think this is very American. After Kancil has been defeated in the race, he asked Siput why Siput can run very fast. Siput did not respond his question. Instead, he says, "You are so arrogant, Kancil. It doesn't matter how I got here. What matters, Kancil, is that you must learn that no matter how big or small, how fast or slow, all creatures are important. And you, Kancil, you should stop being so arrogant." Sorry. Through Siput, Tamara wishes to tell her audience of children that each person is equal and has his or her own duty. The big animals have their own tasks, so do the small animals. The same is true with animals who can only walk slowly. The message Tamara conveys is each person has his or her own role, and every single role is important in its content. So here are some messages across culture I think. Plodding wins the race. Slow and steady wins the race. Together we conquer, alone we fail. Cooperation works miracles. Do not laugh at anyone who seems inferior to you. When you make up your mind to achieve something, work on and on, slowly but surely, and never stop. From Tamara building, no matter how big or small, how fast or slow, all creatures are important. However, we have here some messages which are also similar in several places. Questions. For whom are the stories? This is a good question and a tricky question. So there has been some criticism for me about using Kancil stories. Why do you use stories of Kancil? The stories of Kancil tell about being deceitful and mischievous. Okay, so, and here is some of the criticism I have written here by Nini. Parents perhaps do not realize that the stories of Kancil as bedtime stories contain no pedagogical loads for preschool children of 2 to 5 years old. The episode, in fact, teach them how to cheat. Be careful in using the Kancil stories for preschool children. That's what Nini said in 1995. And in 1999, my friend April Salam comments the possible cultural implication of the stories of Kancil or similar stories for the owners of the stories, perhaps Malay and Japanese or other people. He looks at the knowledge and the way of thinking of the owners in working out or solving the problems in their life. And here's Salam has to question, is there a possibility that the cleverness of tricks offered by Kancil become a model consciously or unconsciously in everyday social life? Okay. Number two, how is the cleverness practiced in everyday social life? This is very interesting question. And even Salam states that the spirit of Kancil has impacts in solving the political, economic, legal, and social problems. Even he suggested to parents that some aspect of Kancil cleverness, including transformation, should not be included in children's stories. And in this, for this criticism, I think I have rehabilitated the Kancil's name. I wrote and I modified the characteristics of Kancil. Okay. Kilajar Subroto himself, he rehabilitated the characteristic of Kancil. Kancil is not, for him, Kancil is not a character who is naughty or deceitful, but he is a hero who helps everyone. Okay. And I follow this advice by Kilajar Subroto. And in addition, a number of versions of Kancil stories contain the teaching of Japanese mysticism and religion, especially Islam, and ways of life which obviously address for adults. That's why I never use this episode from this version for my performance for children. And yeah, Kancil by Vladimir Prop has been said as the intellect and cunning, and he has a strength, although he's weak, and he can defeat the stronger enemy. Cunning and deception are the tools of the weak against the strong, and this conforms to the moral requirements of the listener. And this one has been inspired me to modify the Kancil stories. Something like in the what I have written in my book, Kancilayana. Okay. In that, perhaps I have minimize the characteristic of Kancil itu di situ. Okay, look, this is a research from the Japanese literature by Ki Patmo Puspito, the characteristics of Kancil. What is it? Look at this. I have 12. Number 1, he is smarter than the other characters. Number 2, good at using ambiguous words. 3, his trickeries are hidden. 4, good at making arguments. 5, full of strategy. 6, his thoughts are not reliable. 7, execute his tricks without hard feeling. Number 8, good at expressing ideas. 9, clever in solving every single problem. 10, able to solve every single problem. 11, expert in the details of every danger. And number 12, he never forgets what he has decided to do. To avoid dangers, he polishes his tricks that he will use. Okay. And this by Patmo Puspito, and several years ago. Of course, then the interpretation or reinterpretation of the episodes of Kancil and even the character of Kancil is very important, like what I have done, and also Kilajar has done for the Kancil. So look at this picture. On the right is the real Kancil, the animal Kancil. This is the Kancil of Kilajar Subroto. Kancil in left is made by Lajar Subroto. In Aceh, Kancil is called Pelanduk Kanci. Okay, Pelanduk Kanci. As I told you, there is a book called Hikayat Pelanduk Jinaka. In Aceh, Kanci means tricky or deceitful. That's why in Aceh, at the end of the book, at the end of the episode, the whole episode, Kancil should be killed. I'm sorry, I have to use that word. Okay, because he's bad person, considered as bad person. Okay, he has what is it? Make other people, other animals suffer. Okay. Yeah. After surviving a long history of failures, Wayang Kancil was revived in 1980 in Yogyakarta by Lajar Suproto, a puppet maker, and his friends. Wayang Kancil is a shadow puppet where the stories are mainly taken from the stories about Kancil. These stories are believed as a world where morals and values are taught for not only to children but also for adults. Wayang Kancil has been revived in 1980 and popularized by Lajar Suproto and his colleagues in the Yogyakarta Special Territory. One crucial point that should be noted is that Lajar Suproto has sided with Kancil since his first performance in 1980. He is the defender of his Kancil as the result of some criticism towards his Wayang Kancil. Among the Indonesians, the hero Kancil is known as a stricter, which is always accused as a deceitful creature. Therefore, there are pros and cons whether the episodes of Kancil are appropriate for children. That's why I have repositioned of the figure of Kancil, and also I have modified the characteristic of Kancil. And also I have also added the tactical values in the episode that I have written in my Kancilayana. Terima kasih. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Eddie. It was a great discussion, especially for this special month celebrating Wayang, which we know that we have special day to celebrate Wayang on 7 November. And this month we had so many occasions that related to Wayang. For the audience, I would like to remind you to fill the form attendance and the feedback. For the next session, we will have a question and answer session. So the audience might put their question in the chat box. Okay, audience, you may raise your hand if you have any question for this session before. Okay, Mr. Eddie, I'm curious that it was a great presentation, and what makes you wanna keep this kancil as a great culture in this our society?
Okay, so as Ibu Moy has mentioned previously, that UNESCO has proclaimed that Indonesian Wayang as a masterpiece of oral and intangible heritage of humanity last November 7, 2003. But in return, that's what I read from the UNESCO statement. UNESCO has requested that the Indonesian people should participate in preserving the cultural heritage. So it is, or it should be noted that what is meant by Indonesian Wayang is not only Wayang Kulit, but also other types of puppets in Indonesia, including Wayang Kancil, a type of Wayang performance by that take Kancil stories as the source of the story. And the activity of preserving Indonesian Wayang, in my opinion, can also be done by making documentation of the Wayang itself, including Wayang Kancil. And in this way, in my opinion, this book wants to share with the audience of Indonesian cultural activists in general and abroad, okay, especially those who are interested in Wayang Kancil. So that's the reason, the main reason.
Okay, Mr. Eddie. So I'm curious, why in Indonesia animal deer synonymous with an intelligent?
What did you say again?
I'm curious about why in Indonesia animal deer is familiar with intelligent.
Oh, animal what? What is it? Animal.
Kenapa wayang bisa di Indonesia? Kenapa dikaitkan dengan kecerdikan?
Wayang dikaitkan dengan kecerdikan. I think I did not say that. The Kancil.
There are many netizen that told me that the wayang is the kancil. Sorry, the kancil is interest with the intelligence.
Okay, Kancil is considered as an intelligent animal. That's one interpretation. Okay, that's one interpretation. But other interpretation, Kancil has also naughty. He's like a naughty boy, very naughty. Cleverness. He uses his cleverness to deceive other people. So that depends on how you look at the animal, the kancil. Because in Indonesia, what is an animal which is considered as clever is not only kancil. Other places, they have monkey who is considered as clever, okay? And in other places, also different animal. Okay?
Air bukan pakai air.
Okay. Okay, that's moving.
Okay, thank you, Miss Mochiba. You may open your question.
Thank you very much. Yes, I wish to ask a question to Pa Edi, since it's one of the very rare occasions to speak with expert of Wayang. May I?
Yo,
So, Pa Edi, you are the researcher and you're also the practitioner of Wayang for a long time. And I would like to know, what do you think? And do you think that the Wayang tradition is surviving well in Indonesia, or you think that there's something to be concerned about? Do you think Wayang tradition would continue 20 years, 50 years, 100 years down the time, or there must be some actions to be taken?
okay. So thank you, Ibu Moy. Thank you for coming also. Well, so now every night, every single night, I always watch puppet show, at least from the YouTube. Okay, so I can always watch puppet show, which is live and also recorded. Even every single what is it minute, I can watch Wayang, and there is always a new story performed every night in YouTube. Okay, and it's always interesting, and there are so many spectators coming to the performance. Okay, although now perhaps the live show in the city is a little bit less because of we still have the pandemic actually, but it has been what is it increasing in the last 6 months or 7 months. Okay, almost every evening. I always watch a puppet show. Okay, from the YouTube, thanks to technology. So I think so. Puppet show not only in Java but also in West Java, in Bali, in Lombok, they will survive. Uh, Technology has helped them to survive. Okay, terima kasih.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eddie, for the explanation. Ms. Motiva, is there any question again? Okay, as I read in the chat box, there are questions that we will ask from Sarah. From Sarah, 20 years ago, the same question was asked: is Wayang a dying art?
Okay. Okay, so this is the answer from Sarah. Okay, it's not a question. I think it's a comment. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So you can read the comment. I think you can read the comment by Sarah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mbak Sarah.
For the next question, why is the story of the Indonesian fairy tale Kancil and the crocodile is very related, sir?
Can you say it again? Sorry. Why is? Can you say it again?
Sorry, sir. For the question, what is a dark side or the positive side between Kancil and the Wayang?
Okay. Okay. So again, so a story needs interpretation. Okay, there, this is about the kancil and the crocodile. Yeah, when I perform this story, then I will not kill the crocodile, but the kancil will forgive crocodile. Okay, because crocodile said that I will not do that kind of bad deed again. So that's why kancil then at last forgave crocodile, and crocodile can live again. That's one interpretation by me. And I never kill crocodile, but usually then the crocodile will be killed after the tree has been hit again to the crocodile. Okay, Sonia, I cannot hear your voice.
Oh, yes, sir. Oh. Sorry, what's the question? Miss Moichiba, you might turn on your camera. There is a question from Zara. So, for the question.
Yeah, could you help me to understand the question? Yeah.
For the question, you have been a Wayang researcher for a long time.
Okay, this is my question. Yeah. And Sarah responded, say that it's no, it's surviving well, right? Yes.
Right.
Yeah, no, I believe so. I mean, I think wayang, whether it's wayang or batik, certain traditions in Indonesia have managed to really thrive well through government support, the private sector's participations, and whatnot. But for instance, within wayang, there are different type of wayang. So you have wayang kulit, and then you have like wayang beber, and maybe they don't survive in the same way. Perhaps Pa AD can give his insight on this, or maybe Debbie or somebody else who know better about this tradition.
Thank you, Sonia. I'll take over from now on. Thank you, Mrs. Moichiba, for the knowledge and information, and also for IT. And then, is there any other question from this audience on Zoom, and also from the YouTube probably? Because other than this Zoom meeting, we also do live streaming from YouTube, and the link will be shared on the Zoom chat box. Is there any question, especially for Mrs. Moichiba and also for Mrs. Debbie Cole? All right, so there is a question or probably like asking for a suggestion from Khairun Niam through the Zoom chat box. Pak Edi, mohon saran, terutama bagi kami generasi sekarang, untuk bisa tetap menceritakan dongeng kancil ini tanpa mengurangi nilai-nilai yang ada kepada anak kami, begitu Pak. Jadi bagaimana cara untuk menceritakan dongeng-dongeng kancil tanpa mengurangi nilai-nilai yang terdapat pada dongeng kancil tersebut pada anak-anak, begitu Pak Edi? Pertanyaan untuk Pak Edi.
Boleh saya menjawab dengan bahasa Indonesia?
Baik, monggo Pak. Kami akan translate.
Dengan Pak siapa tadi?
Dari Khairun Niam.
Khairun Niam.
Baik Pak. Ya.
Bapak Mas atau Om? Oke, Mas. Ini ke Bapak atau Ibu ya? Pak Khairun Niam, supaya saya tidak salah.
Sepertinya Mas.
Oh, Mas.
Mas.
Okay.
Ya.
Oke, Mas Karunia. Jadi saya akan bercerita sedikit agak panjang. Jadi ketika saya bermain wayang kancil sejak tahun 90 dengan Ki Lejar Subroto almarhum, itu banyak kritik pada saya dan Ki Lejar karena apa? Ya itu tadi saya katakan tadi pada presentasi saya bahwa dongeng kancil itu kan banyak bercerita tentang tipu menipu gitu lah. Gitu. Ya. Dulu waktu saya masih kecil oleh nenek saya dan ibu saya itu juga dikasih cerita itu. Tapi ya sekarang kok saya tidak jadi pencuri juga gitu loh. Pencuri hati ya, mencuri hati istri saya dulu. Tapi bukan itu kan maksudnya. Jadi, nah oleh karena itu untuk menceritakan dongeng kancil, tidak harus dongeng kancil ya, dongeng semacamnya. Karena yang semacam dongeng kancil itu ada di mana-mana. Ada di Asia, ada di Eropa, ada di Amerika. Ini dari masukan-masukan yang saya terima. Memang harus dilihat pada usia berapa seseorang harus bercerita tentang dongeng binatang. Mungkin tidak harus kancil ya, dongeng binatang. Semacam dongeng kancil. Usianya berapa? Ini si pencerita, nenek atau ibu atau om itu harus pandai-pandai membuat interpretasi, modifikasi, itu ya. Sebab kalau tidak, mungkin justru itu akan jadi berbalik. Ini yang sering saya dapat kritikan-kritikan itu. Jadi harus ada sisi positifnya. Kalau yang baik ya dikasih reward, kalau yang tidak baik ya dikasih hukuman. Nah, oleh karena itu Ki Lejar Subroto itu mengubah posisi kancil itu, mereposisi menjadi pahlawan. Oke. Saya juga mempunyai modifikasi-modifikasi tentang binatang kancil. Hampir pada setiap pertunjukan saya dengan cerita-cerita baru saya menempatkan kancil ini layaknya manusia biasa yang punya kelemahan tetapi bisa punya kelebihan dan kadang-kadang juga helpless, nggak bisa apa-apa dan nggak bisa mikir sebagai manusia biasa. Nah, cuma yang saya bawakan ini tentu agak sulit juga kadang-kadang harus disampaikan, dikomunikasikan pada anak-anak. Nah, saya harus jujur pada rekan-rekan. Saya itu belum pernah sukses bermain wayang kancil di hadapan anak-anak. Belum pernah sukses sampai sekarang. Ini saya harus jujur. Kalau di audiens saya itu heterogen gitu nggak masalah. Karena apa? Saya itu sudah tidak kadang-kadang tidak bisa lagi melihat apa yang ada di kepala saya anak-anak itu. Makanya saya kalau main di depan anak-anak, saya harus minta tolong orang lain. Siapa itu? Biasanya saya akan minta tolong seorang guru taman kanak-kanak. Karena apa? Guru taman kanak-kanak itu paling disukai murid-muridnya. Semua omongannya didengarkan. Nah, dulu anak-anak ini yang saya alami pandai untuk membuat modifikasi. Jadi saya kalau harus main dengan di depan anak-anak itu saya minta tolong orang lain. Kalau sendiri itu bisa mampus ya. Gitu Mas. Mas Khairunisa.
Apakah sudah terjawab Mas Khairuniam? Semoga sudah terjawab ya Mas Khairuniam. Alright, to continue this event, oke, matur suwun. Matur suwun Pak Edi dari Mas Khairuniam. Alright, so is there any other question before we heading into the next session? Oh, there is a question from Alex for Mr. Eddie.
Yeah.
through the Zoom chat box. Alex wanna ask for Mr. Eddie, how difficult is it to translate the Indonesian fable story to global audience so they understand what is the meaning of the stories, Pak Eddie?
Yeah, jadi so when I do translation from Japanese to English, this is I have to admit that I need time, energy. So the most problem for me is idiom. When later you read my translation, I think that is not the real English. I would say it's Malioboro English, not the real British English or Australian English. Although in some of my books, I have borrowed some Indonesian, I mean, some English idioms from the book that I have written together with Miss Irene Ritchie from Melbourne. So that's perhaps looks like English, but perhaps the other Englishes are more or less Malioboro English. It's quite difficult. I give you an example like this. I cannot use the sentence, I will kill you, when I had performance in Melbourne. So my friend from Melbourne said, do not use this sentence. You cannot use, I will kill you for children. And then saya harus mengubah. Then I have to change. So what should I change? And she said to me, you should say, I will get you. Bukan I will kill you. Tapi itu bahasa Inggris Australia. This is Australian language. Saya tidak tahu nanti di Inggris bagaimana. Apakah bisa mengatakan I will kill you. But Sarah will do you. Maybe you can give some information. Atau Bu Debbie dari Amerika. Bisa nggak untuk anak-anak I will kill you itu. Nah, jadi begitulah. Idiom itu bagi saya yang the most problem. Okay. Terima kasih, Mas.
All right, thank you, Pak Eddie. Did it answer the question, Mr. Alex, from the Zoom chat box? All right, there is no response. I think that it did. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Mr. Alex. Thank you, Pak Eddie. All right. All right, that was our last question for this Q&A session, and we are heading into the next session, which is the summary of today's webinar. So in the first session, we had Mrs. Moichiba for the book launch and also about the safeguarding about intangible cultural heritage, which in Indonesia such as Wayang, and also we have Batik, and also we also learn about other intangible cultural heritage from other countries such as India, and we also learn about the Wayang as effective media to tell stories, and also we also about the Scooby-Doo and also the lion on the grass, and a lot of knowledge and information from Miss Devi. And also we got the fable and races from across the world, like the Bear and the Tortoise, and also about the similarities with the story of Kancil and other stories that have similarities with Kancil. And then we will head into the last session, which is the closing. I would like to thank all the participants that already attending this session. And thank you for our presenters today, Mrs. Moichiba, Dr. Debbie Cole, and Dr. Eddie Pursubayanto, for the new knowledge that we all have learned during this webinar. And also to remind everyone that the book Kancilayana, Naskah Pedalangan Wayang Kancil by Dr. Eddie Pursubayanto can be ordered now, as we already launched the book today by Mrs. Moichiba. You can order the book online from e-commerce sites such as Tokopedia and Shopee, and you can find it easily for 95.000 or 95,000 Indonesian rupiah. And before we close the event, I would like to remind everyone that we need your feedbacks about our webinar event stop. So we had the attendance form before, and now we need your feedback to evaluate our performance today. Please fill the attendance and feedback form that the link has already been shared on the box, because we will send the e-certificate based on the attendance and feedback form. We would appreciate it if you would provide your feedback genuinely and wholeheartedly. And on behalf of the Committee of Webinar Events Talk the 39, with the theme of Wayang Across Cultures, Storytelling and Interculturality, thank you for joining us today. Happy Wayang Month. Happy World Wayang Day. Let's celebrate and preserve our intangible culture and have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much for attending this event. Thank you.
COI Agroteknologi and Halal Study adalah laboratorium pengujian yang mengacu pada ISO 17025 dan melayani pelaku usaha dalam pengajuan sertifikasi halal produk 025 dan melayani pelaku usaha. COI Smart and Green Building Information Modeling adalah laboratorium pemodelan dalam bidang smart pemeliharaan bangunan dan survei pemetaan. COI Smart Systems and Innovation merupakan laboratorium pengembangan energi baru terbarukan sekaligus penyedia data informasi dalam sebuah sistem yang terintegrasi. COI Business